Swinging back to why we're here, which in this calendar year is because after our coverage of the civic election, which we were only able to do because of your support for independent media, and there is none in Winnipeg. We're it. Rebel media doesn't cover this province. I'm not blaming them. The way they've grown organically has not incorporated Manitoba. I've been a voice, Spirit Kenny, with me since 2007. In terms of the Great Canadian Talk Show on TV, podcasts, but City Circus on Shaw TV. We had a great run that allowed politicians, allowed elected officials, allowed city councillors and MLAs, political leaders in our community, Colin Craig of the Taxpayers Federation, late Harvey Smith, who taught me so much, Councillor Smith, Councillor Brawadi, Councillor Schweier, it's off the top of my head here, Councillor Allard, Matt Allard even came on. We've put in a lot of effort, we've broken stories, we've held those in power to account, we've called out media bias and inaccuracies, as well as complimented the good work. We've tried to highlight things. And here we are marching towards an election anticipated for October, and your support is vital to the success of this independent journalism. More support comes in, the more time we can spend. And I'm doing an investigative piece now that's going to touch on provincial politics and two different ministers, I can tell you, involving an incident with teenagers. There's a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of research goes into stories. You're invited to sponsor segments, to sponsor programs, to sponsor live appearances, to advertise with us. We appreciate every gesture of support that we receive, that we've ever received. But here we are, it's 2023, and you're going to hear things that you're not going to hear talked about in other media. For instance, may or may not have been Aaron McDowell, although I may be mistaken, who took note of a 338 Canada poll, Manitoba model, showing the NDP at 29 plus 11. This is as of February 5th, 2023. The NDP, 29 plus 11. The PCs at 25, down 11. The Liberals holding fort at 3. So they reflected the seat changes, a swing of 11 seats. In the previous poll that I recall, this would show the NDP, I think, having actually slipped 5 points. I think they had 34 or something. So you see that the gap, it would appear to be narrowing for whatever value you want to put in the polls. With regards to Kinew, trying to become premier, leading a very far left party against a party that's been getting battered before Heather Stefanson took over from Brian Pallister. And there's a lot spoken and unspoken about the reasons why and what's contributed to it. As the Tories gear up for trying to defend their turf at the legislature, they're undergoing a nomination process. And as part of that, different characters emerge on the scene. Different ridings have become competitive because of the variety of resignations, departures from the caucus, from the PC caucus. And political parties, there's different kinds of candidates. There's, the NDP used to run like very remarkably normal members of the community in rural ridings, but it's been so swept up now that all they run is literally there's only like 3 classifications of candidates for the NDP from the looks of it. That's basically like teachers, nurses, and ideologues. Political parties also have their own farm system. The NDP's use school trustees in particular and completely outflanked the other political movements in this province in that regard, and using the school trustees, school boards as a farm system. As well, they have their own internal process for grooming, so to speak, talent for bringing them through the ranks, getting them exposed to policy and implementation and, personnel, human resources, all these fancy terms. And some, part of this process is they're going to end up in a public, public facing. Well, sometimes things don't go as expected. Jordan Sisson was had a variety of positions in the Pallister government, senior manager of regional cabinet operations, director of operations and stakeholder relations, so that's gatekeepering, and a little bit of crisis management, or figuring out what goes where on the pegboard up and down. And then, lo and behold, from November 2021, he was chief of staff for Heather Stefanson. Was seeking the nomination in Brandon West, and lo and behold, according to the Brandon Sun, I think on Friday, due to what he called family reasons, Jordan Sisson is not going to be running for the nomination in Brandon West. So there's a high-profile candidate. The party spent a lot of time promoting internally, and it won't be his turn in Brandon West. Meanwhile, the departure of Cliff Cullen in Spruce Woods opened up that seat. And pretty much immediately, a guy named Grant Jackson, who honestly don't remember having heard his name previously. He's from Souris, and this riding, Spruce Woods. I'm really not familiar with it, so I'm sure it's relatively newer, and I just haven't kept track of what is now called whatever in the last election and a half, I'd say. In any event, this goes from like Rivers, Manitoba. You want to talk about a great wrestling town. We did a show in Rivers a couple of years ago. That building was packed. I think it was for the firefighters. Boy, I hope they have us out again. Anyways, it's from like Rivers. It stretches, I think, from way west, and I think it starts more or less at North Hill and Brandon. So it's sprawling riding. Grant Jackson. So a story that I picked up on him, because I'm not familiar with him, was from DiscoverWestman.com. It said that Jackson spent a number of years working at the local level for Larry Maguire, and in Ottawa as MP Maguire's office. So he's endorsed by Larry Maguire, and now I see, he worked for Larry for a number of years. He transitioned to work in the Manitoba legislature and worked in Winnipeg for the past 3 years. That sounds a little vague. Sounded to me a little vague. Okay, transition to work in the legislature and that's kind of redundant because we know the legislature's in Winnipeg. So they're trying to fill up space here, make it seem like they're providing information that they aren't. Interestingly enough, now, what was it that Jordan Sisson, he was the chief of staff? Grant Jackson was a special assistant he was a special advisor in the Premier's office. I think he was probably an advisor to another minister as well previously. So here's a guy that was an advisor to the Premier, and he's got competition himself for this nomination, which is kind of weird because it was originally set, I think memberships closed, I think January 27th, and the nomination was going to be on February 11th, and then it was bumped to February 25th because that's a very narrow window. And in fact, because it was such a narrow window, this came to my attention because Shelly Glover, who barely lost to Stefanson in the race to replace Pallister, she endorsed a candidate sight unseen. She said she'd never met Linda McRae Walker. She knows of her work around Brandon and Westman, but she felt as a matter of principle that the party needed to have processes where there is, fair competition for seats in the legislature, for nominations in the legislature. And Shelly Glover endorsed this person who on the surface seemed like, very viable kind of candidate in that riding. And lo and behold, I never realized that Ray Walker was married because I never knew Ray Walker really personally, the longtime Brandon broadcaster, and I think particularly known in the sports world. Well, this is Ray Walker's wife, running against the former special advisor to Premier Stefanson in a nomination meeting that was going to be on February 11th, but got bumped back to February 25th. As I said, Linda's been endorsed by Shelly Glover, who's also endorsed somebody else. And that would be Braden Mazurkowitz. And Braden, of course, certainly a well-known entity in political back rooms and in some cases in front rooms, and has had his name in the paper and other media from time to time. Was certainly notable in terms of his involvement with the unsuccessful, albeit unsuccessful, campaign, which was just, I'm sure, hair-raising to work on and be around for everybody, the Glen Murray campaign. And he survived that, and instead of it driving him out of politics, it drove him further into politics, seeking the nomination in Kildonan, in River East, North Kildonan, replacing the retiring Kathy Cox, seeking the Conservative nomination. I don't know that anybody else is running, but Braden's he's already accrued, and it's on his. You just go to his website, and you'll see this accrual of nominations that is pretty. He's a people person to start with, and he's got extensive experience federally, provincially, and as we see in terms of, civic, in a civic direction. He's put together, right out of the gate, a tremendously impressive range of endorsements. Shelly Glover, as I mentioned, Dr. Ian Rebb, Kyle Smoley, who's an executive assistant, the EA for Councillor Brawadi. So very familiar with North Kildonan by definition. The past president of the PCs in Manitoba, Dale Smeltz, has endorsed Braden. This past weekend, two more. Chief Glenn Hudson, a guy I know. Braden and I see eye to eye on the future of Manitoba, and I fully endorse his candidacy in Kildonan River East. He represents and respects First Nations. He's going to be a great representative in the legislature for all Manitobans. And Paula Havixbeck, who's known Braden since he was a student at my class at the Asper School of Business in the mid-2000s and assisted on her winning campaign in Charleswood. So, here's a guy who's eager. The party's trying to renew itself, and he's unorthodox, I think, for maybe the traditional types in the Manitoba Conservative Party. But a lot of conservatism now has, moved towards, a certain kind of centrist practices with conservative values as a core. And Braden's also proven that he's clever. He'd run a different kind of campaign if he were to, if he were to win the nomination. And there's just, how do I put this? He could end up changing the way a lot of Tories in urban Winnipeg approach campaigning, because they got to find a way to win, or whatever. And notwithstanding whatever value there will be in asking questions about the background and capacity and capability of Wab Kinew and his NDP team, Braden has he has an awful lot of friends, and as I said, just a different way of coming at things. I don't want to call it necessarily modern, but it's modified. I mean, it is modern by definition. He's pretty sharp when it comes to the backroom technicalities and, keeping track of voter intentions and all those other things that I've never, thank God, had to sully my fingertips with. I'm more of an ink-stained wretch. In any event, the list of endorsements, it's impressive. Be interesting to see if somebody tries to step forward and vie for that seat to replace Kathy Cox. And that would be two candidates there that I've just mentioned that have endorsements from Shelly Glover. And I don't know that Premier Stefanson is endorsing anybody in this process. I would think not. No, I don't think any of the MLAs are allowed to. That's my recollection. In any event, nobody else is going to be talking about the campaigns like this. Have you really heard a breakdown like this on radio in Winnipeg or in any of the Trudeau or otherwise subsidized columns? Or no, you haven't. And so that's a kind of work that we want to do, the kind of research we do, just bring forward some facts, try to keep the fiction to a minimum, try to keep the speculation within the bounds of reason, and try to keep your interest rate sky high as we head towards the 2023 provincial election.